You know, because you got like 6 episodes of an intro.
Should I? I stopped it and then I pressed record again. Should we keep going or do you want to start again?
No, just keep going. It's fine.
Okay, so the thing is...
All right, guys, everything's fine.
We are not in. We were just talking about, because we've got a new setup. You might be able to tell the audio quality has somewhat improved from the first few episodes. And I was just talking about like, hey, look at us, imposters no more. And then I realised I totally blanked on giving Mikey the only instruction that is required for this podcast. So I've done a really good job, and now I'm just back in the imposter hole again.
I love it.
So, Mikey, the way this podcast starts...
Explain your bio.
is that we get our guests to read their own bio.
Oh, fuck.
Do you have it somewhere easly
What's
accessible?
the language warning on this podcast? It's a podcast.
Oh,
say whatever
fucks
you
and
want.
shits.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Yeah.
Whatever word you want. If I go to your website now, would I find a Mikey Ting bio?
That's a good question. Actually, Carissa's written the bio, so it might be quite nice to... It's not really in spirit of what you're trying to achieve. I didn't write my bio.
Ah, so Carissa wrote it for you.
Well, we would have written it together, but Carissa has, as you guys know, a beautiful way with words.
So Carissa, by the way, for our listeners, is Mikey's partner in love, life and business, and the other half of Studio Ting. And she will also be a future guest on the Imposter Syndrome Club, which we're very much looking forward to.
Yeah, I love the idea of have a read of it and see how it feels reading about yourself, but through someone else's words.
I don't know if I can find it quickly. That's the
That's
only
okay.
thing. Oh, no, I know where it is. I just had to write another bio for another job coming up. So I'll find it really quickly.
While you're doing that, Mikey, do you write specific bios for like every new job or thing that you have, or?
Yeah, I have to, because I do so many different things, but I don't really have like, I'm not being facetious about it, but like I don't have a foot in the door in a lot of the things that I do. Not really. Like if I do public speaking, I don't have a huge list of public speaking engagements that I've done that it's like, oh yes, Mikey Ting, he's a public speaker. No need to explain. Where it's like, and I'll talk within that realm. Sometimes I'll talk about different things. So if I'm talking about mental health specifically, or if I'm talking about creativity, or if I'm talking about process, or if I'm talking about working with my partner, they're not always like, they're all intertwined, but it's not always like, you know, I write to the brief basically. So yes, I write a new bio every time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or I tweak the bio, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that's an important way of doing a bit of the work for the other person. Like it's pre-filtering it. I think it shows like a sense of empathy as well, because they're kind of two schools of thought, right? Like the one would be, I don't need to self-edit and this is me and this is my shit and whatever, if you're into that or not. But I think it just shows like it's like an empathy. It's like I care about you, I care about your time, and I care about your project. So I'm going to give you the information that's the most useful to you.
Yeah. I mean, maybe deep down that stems from a human empathy, but we talked about it off air. It's more about like strategic, but also like just the vibe of like being a pro, like just, yeah, making it easier for people, but presenting yourself in a way that you'd expect others to meet you at the table as well.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, it's very little of me, very little of my time and effort to do something specific that'll help someone else down the track, where it's like maybe it is an empathy thing. But if I change my bio, for instance, even small tweaks, which are specific to that brief or that PR company or that talent agency or whatever, then they don't have to go digging. Then it's just like, oh yeah, this. And I think it strengthens your brief too, because I'm writing a bio as part of a conceptual brief or a conceptual framework that I'm trying to develop, or part of a creative direction that I want to steer something towards. So it's like, if my bio reinforces that, if I pad out the bits that complement the thing I'm trying to do, then it's like, there goes the empathy. Now it's about selfishness.
Respect. It doesn't have to be either or. It can be all of the things.
Totally.
I'll just airplane mode this, and then I got a bio for you.
Love it.
Amazing.
I had completely forgotten that was like the central, like we decided on, we were like, this is this concept and
Here's
it's cool.
this guy. Go for it.
All right.
He's
are you
credible.
ready?
You got to believe us. The two most credible podcasters on planet
Oh
Earth.
my God. It's fine. But it's perfect because the fuck ups are baked into the premise. So it's like the worse we fuck up, the more we're like, yep, this is cool. It's fine.
It's very on
We're
brand.
okay. Yeah. All right,
It's
Mikey.
on brand for the podcast in general too, right? No one likes a
Exactly.
super slick
Mikey,
corporate
that's what I
podcast.
meant.
Oh, yes, of course. The podcast. Very
I love
good.
how you think the fuck up's on brand for me, because it is very much the case.
Are you ready to go?
I'm ready.
All right, I'm going to count you in. The bio of Mikey Ting, written by Carissa Caramacco, and we're off.
Specifically for a public speaking engagement, right?
All right.
Mm-hmm.
What we just talked about. This
Yep.
is a specific bio. I think it's okay. Actually, I don't know. I'll just read it. Mikey Ting is a Chinese Kiwi creative based in Melbourne, Australia. Chinese Kiwi creative. Hyphen. As a painter, Mikey resurrects found art from dusty retirement and paints them into relevance with contemporary typography and old school hand painted techniques, heart-led and bold in both colour and sentiment. After a 20s filled with the usual ups and downs of a creative with too many ideas, Mikey found a real lifeline in his discovery of therapy and learning to take care of himself. It was a lightning bolt moment, and the wheels haven't stopped turning since. Today, Mikey's work continues to explore the notion of oneself and of personal truths, important meaty discussions presented in a way that is immediately palatable, disarming, approachable, and often cloaked in his signature dark humour. Mikey's work is the result of craft, conversation, and connection with his clients, imbued with the same sense of heart and care that permeates not only his work, but the world he's curated around him. He is passionate about art making, creativity, and mental health, and will chew your ear off about it given half a chance. Mikey co-owns and operates Studio Ting with his partner in life and business, Carissa Caramacco.
That is beautiful.
Yeah. Can Carissa write our bios
That's exactly
for
I'm
us?
like,
She can. She's an excellent writer. Yeah.
Yeah,
She did the heavy lifting on that. I did the tweaking.
Yeah.
I usually do the tweaking for just because I'll explain a brief, or so if something comes across my desk, Carissa will get the the Cliff Notes version basically, and then I'll take her excellent writing and twist it to the brief. Yeah.
What strikes me about that, as opposed to like when we read our bios, certainly with my own, is that it reads, and this might be indicative of what it's for as well, because you're presenting on something that's obviously a bit of your personal story. Some of the awkwardness that I experience when reading my own bio, it's like, just me as one of the blah, blah, blah,
A lot of third person stuff, eh?
Yeah. But it reads like a list of dot points, which is fine. Like that's the purpose that it's serving. Whereas this feels a bit more conversational, like it feels a little bit less formal, and therefore, I don't know, and you tell me. So our experience of a lot of our guests and ourselves so far is that it feels a bit icky reading your own bio out loud, but just watching your body language, you didn't seem to feel uncomfortable for you.
Just on the bits where you refer to yourself as Mikey. Just those bits. They feel a bit weird. Because you're only ever writing it as someone imagining, you're imagining someone saying it, not you. You're not telling. It's weird to read your bio, is what I'm getting at. Out loud to other people, especially to people who are already friends who know you. And it's just like, oh, this is great.
I loved hearing it though. It's something I've found in all the episodes we've done is hearing people that we know at varying degrees of closeness, but people who we know creatively and professionally and also to a degree personally. I love hearing all the other stuff they've done, because you realize you only know one kind of fragment of it or one facet of it. But yeah, I was really struck by, like you said, just the sense of, I think what felt weird for us certainly is listing achievements without the personhood in there. But yours has got this really strong sense of storytelling and your journey as a person.
And no achievements.
I felt like there were achievements in there. But yeah, I suppose it wasn't listed in a CV kind of way.
Yeah, which you're trying to avoid at all costs, because the people you're writing it for are not interested in a CV.
Yeah,
they've already contacted you.
Yeah. So can we back up? So this is you were saying that this is your bio for public speaking engagements or work. Can you break down for us, firstly, what that's about, and just talk to a bit of all the different things that you do?
This is specifically for not just a public speaking engagement. It's for a public speaking engagement on mental health and creativity. So that's why there was a whole paragraph in there about my journey with mental health and therapy and how pivotal that was. I mean, that paragraph probably remains anyway because it does inform my art making, and my art making is it's the central part of why I do what I do for a living.
Yeah.
Without art making and creativity, I don't think I have any other work, right? Like I can't think of a job where it doesn't involve that. I mean, it's part of how I operate anyway, just in a day-to-day sense. But that's what that one was for. That's why it was very mental health focused.
Is that going to be a series of talks? Is that something that you're going to be doing, kind of creating that and taking it to many places, or is that a specific engagement?
Specific engagement.
Is it something I feel like I could so see you in the sort of little that I know of your work, like I can see that being a whole line of inquiry. Is that a direction you'd want to go in?
Yeah, I love doing it. It's I guess it's few and far between these kinds of jobs. It requires a client who is pushing a narrative that isn't common. It's getting more common, but the stars have to align for this sort of thing to, trying to get a job as a creative, and whether it's a corporate job or whatever, getting shortlisted and then approached for a job by a PR agency or a talent agency or whatever it is, already so many things have to go right. You have to have the right look, the right feel, you're making the right stuff that they want. So you're already part of a very detailed process to get to that point. And then you just, multiply it by a factor of 10 if it's about a specific thing that you do. And this happens to be a specific thing I do. So I don't get a lot of this work, but it means that when I get it, it's meaningful and it's valuable. And I love doing it. Yeah.
So for the benefit of our listeners, Mikey, tell us a little bit about all of the various things that you do, because you are an extraordinarily multi-talented human being.
Thank you. I do primarily I think I'm in art direction, or like creative direction. I think is primarily where my skill set lies, though I have no formal experience being a creative director. Apart from now, where I'm the creative director of my own brand, along with Carissa, who shares a lot of the same creative direction strengths. I started as a furniture maker. Actually, I'll back up even further. I started as a musician, and I still am a musician. I still feel in my bones that I am a musician. I moved to Australia from New Zealand, like a lot of people in my early 20s, because I was in a band. I was in a rock and roll band, and we had decided that Melbourne was more fertile grounds for being professional musicians, which proved to be true. I was a professional musician for a good 5 years, and though not financially viable or successful, what a great way to cut your teeth as a creative in Melbourne, as in a city that is so much bigger than the cities we come from in New Zealand. And from there, it's just the usual story. We toured for a bit. The band imploded, as bands do. And then I found myself sort of like a bit lost. Not a bit lost. I was extremely lost. I didn't really know where I stood, because most of my identity was wrapped up in being a musician. And I think you can hear that now. I'm still like really stoic about, I'm still a musician. Even though I haven't written a song in years, there are still songs inside of me. I still feel very passionately about it, and I think I'll never let that go. I think every time I sit down at the piano, music still flows out of me naturally. I still love to play. I still love to play with others. And for those people, a lot of people understand when you're in a band or in a group that makes art together, it's magic. There's something magic about it. And then singing, especially singing in a group situation, is something that just like, it's like it grabs your soul from like a place that harkens back like many, many generations, and it seems so like primeval and so fun.
So ancient. You're tapping into this deeply ancient.
Yeah. And not to be like a total like wanker about it, but like just if you can get a group of buddies together, you see it all the time in clubs or like weddings when something comes on familiar to everyone, and it's just like instantly people are overjoyed and connect, and it has nothing to do with your ability to actually sing the song or remember the words. It's just like everyone's doing something together that isn't just about, I don't know, like eating and drinking or, you know, like other like really like primeval things that humans do. I don't know, singing just like touches you in a way that...
I think this is... Sorry.
No, that's all right.
Continue.
No, I was finished.
Oh,
That's my thought was finished.
I just wanted to... It made me so excited hearing you say that because I've been thinking about that. I think this is why adults love weddings so much, aside from the very obvious thing that it's beautiful to just celebrate love. But it's one of the only opportunities you end up having to dance. And just, I think that that's why people, we need this thing. And you do it when you're younger and you're out clubbing and you want to meet people, but then we stop and you kind of have to like wait. And it's like this desert. And then every now and then this oasis of a wedding happens and you're like, oh my God, it's going to be so good. Drink with people in this. Yeah, it could be a bacchanal in Rome. We're going to eat, we're going to drink, we're going to dance and sing and hold each other and just...
And fornicate.
And fornicate hard.
Hard fornication.
What weddings are you going to, Mikey?
Bacchanals.
Sorry, so I cut you off there. So you were speaking about being a musician in your bones. So you'd come to Melbourne, you'd been with the band had imploded, and there was Mikey, and there was no next step.
Lost and confused.
Yeah. So then what?
I do what any sane person did. I moved to the country, and I tried to find out what I had in the tank, and it was a disaster.
What do you mean by that?
I just like the romantic idea of moving into a remote part of the world and not having any connection with people is just like the actual antithesis of all creativity for my personality type and my brain. I need human connection. I need to meet new people. I need to see my passion reflected in other people's faces. And when I didn't have that, it was just like, so I went from being confused and sort of a bit like creatively lonely to moving out there, hoping to find some, I don't know, some magical touchstone of creativity. And it was the total opposite. So I was just like extremely scared and depressed and lonely. And I just felt like, I felt like the fire was just like as low as it's ever been for me. So I came back to Melbourne and got help, started going to therapy, started talking about my issues, made friends with people who also talk about their issues, and very slowly I started to sort of rebuild myself around this notion of sharing and being forward about your passions and, you know, trying new things and learning things. All the way in the country too, it's important to mention that I actually got my first like woodworking tools.
Okay.
Yeah. So amongst all of the sadness, I found a new hobby where I got some old tools off eBay and I started making hilarious creations out of timber and just, you know, going to YouTube University and just learning as you go and making, you know, just like the funniest, stupidest, pokiest things. And that really unlocked a side of me which had been dormant since I was a kid. I used to make things with my dad all the time. I wasn't like the most makery kid. I would color and play Legos and play with toys and stuff. But my dad has always been very hands-on with his making. And my dad is, I've told Jessamy this before because we both love our fathers and the father figures they represent. But my dad is a very empowered, strong, humble character. He's a Chinese migrant and he moved here to study and he met my mum and they got married and had babies. But my dad got made redundant in the 90s as a chemical technician at a milk plant. He got made redundant in the 90s and he faced a real crossroads where he had to figure out what he wanted to do with his life, but he also had 4 boys under the age of 10 to feed and send to school and all that stuff. And my mum, who was a primary school teacher at the time, convinced him to go to teachers' college. Back then it was a teachers' college. And he did. He took the 2 years to study and become a teacher. I think it was 2. It's a bit of a blur. We just had no money as kids because we were on a single parent income. And then he became the world's best teacher. He just immediately found his thing. And because they live in a rural part of New Zealand, there's only one school there. So mum and dad both worked there for a long stint. And as a result, every human being in that town has been taught by my parents. Or like has a kid who's been taught by their parents. Or now has like parents who got taught by my parents. And so because my dad especially is a very like, you can pick him out from a crowd, especially in rural New Zealand. He's a tiny Chinese guy. Everyone's just what's up in my dad in the town constantly. He's almost like a famous guy. But he found a love for something later on in life. When the chips were down, he really had to like, going into it, I can't imagine that he would have been talking about like passions and inspiration and things like that, because one, it's the 90s, two, he's got children and he needs to figure something out. He just lucked out, and with his true like, with this total creative grace that my dad carries and this humble grace that he carries, he just like, I don't know if he lucked into it, but like he found a real thing that he was so passionate about, and he loves to teach. And as a result, he started learning a lot of different stuff too. So my dad is like a maker on many levels like I am. He's a woodworker and a steel fabricator, and he tinkers with like tractors and lawnmowers, and he like works cutting lawns where they live in the beach, and he teaches, and he like builds stuff for people, and he paints murals, and he tattoos. My dad's a fucking tattoo artist. He's got like this tattoo business where they live, and people come in and, you know, when they're on holiday, they just go and get dad tats.
Really?
Yeah, he's ripping. He's ripping.
We've got to go.
Give me a tattoo.
Dude, you got to do it. My mum's covered in tattoos now.
What?
Yeah. My mum, who's like, she's like the most, I don't know. Like, my brother got his first tattoo when he was 14, and it was hilarious. He got totally kicked out of home because he was a rat bag, but he got his first tattoo, and my mum was so off it. Like so off it. So seeing the full circle now, where she's just like covered in
What kind of
hectic dad
tattoos
tats.
does she have? Like
She's got like a snapper on her forearm, and she's got like
the fish?
yeah, the fish, man. Yeah.
So
They're beach
fucking
people, man.
cool.
She's got like this cool fish on her forearm. She's got she did this like fear of flying class because she had like this crazy fear of getting into a plane. And she conquered it. She did this course and conquered it. So she's got a fucking like flying kiwi on her arm.
Yes.
And she's got like dragons and shit. My dad's like, he's a mythical tattoo man. Loves a dragon.
It sounds like what you're saying is you're a chip off the old block.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. Whereas, but I had the like people of our generation, we had more choices, and we got told that we could do anything. Where it was like, my dad, I think, very thankfully in his 30s and 40s found art making and creativity, and he had never had that in his life before. Certainly not from what he's told me about his childhood, which is fucking bleak.
Was this, sorry, can I just ask, my question is, and I'll tell you where I'm going with it is, so your dad he does this complete career pivot. He starts teaching. Also at the same time, he's got this maker mentality where he's excited by a lot of things, curious about a lot of things, open to learning a lot of things, which I have to assume means he's open to being bad at a lot of things at first. So like you're growing up with that as this kind of model and I feel like that's very evident in your own practice, right? Like you've got about 10 different pots boiling on the stove at any given time. What I want to ask is, so as quote unquote millennials, to kind of use that weird term, but there's a sense of like the burden of too much choice as well, right?
100%.
Like, so it's finding this in between space of like fostering curiosity, allowing yourself to play, investigating new things because you don't know where they'll go. Like you spoke about doing your carvings, and you in your word do like these stupid little carvings. Like everything has to be a bit shit at first, right?
100%. If you can't accept that things are going to be shit, you'll never do anything.
Mm.
You'll never do anything.
So can you talk to that, I guess, just because I feel like that's such a central thing to the career that you have wouldn't be possible if you weren't okay with being a bit shit.
I'll backtrack a little bit and talk about something you just touched on, which is really important, which was my dad having a career pivot and a mindset about trying new things. And what's interesting about that, I find it interesting, is that my dad doesn't have the same confidence that I have. This like, yeah, my dad is, I think the thing that, my dad feels like an imposter in everything that he does. He still does. His language that he uses about his own creativity is always like, oh, I'm good at copying other things, but I can never really come up with my own ideas. But he doesn't understand that all the things he's doing are his ideas. He's executing it in a way that he's bringing his own creativity and talent and way he holds a brush, and his technique comes to the forefront in anything he does. So what he makes is unequivocally his work, but he doesn't see that. He sees that as a poor copy or clone of someone else's work. And it's such a fine line with creativity, right? Like you're taking input and spewing it as your own output. And if you're doing a good job, there's like a subtle cloaking of the reference material, but also like the people that get it.
Or it's that, isn't it oh God, I'm going to attribute this to Picasso, but it's probably not. But it's that idea of like, if you copy one person, you're a plagiarist, but if you copy 100 people, you're an artist.
Don't know who said that. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's truth to that or not, but I feel like my dad has never had the confidence to stand out on his own and say, I'm good at anything, which is pivotal to where my personality type is now, because I was raised by that human. At the same time, he said I could do anything, be anything, and that I was mega talented, and here you go, just try your best and you'll succeed. So there's a real there's two very separate roles that my dad and I have, even though we have a lot of the same traits externally. I think from the outside looking in, the way he approaches it as someone who would never have the confidence to sort of like basically see his work for what it is, which is unique and beautiful and skilled and unquestionably David Ting. I wish that he could see that through my eyes sometimes, or through other people's eyes, because he gets a million compliments from every angle every day, because he's a creative powerhouse. He really is. But I don't think that I think he'll carry that till the end of his days. It's just him. He's just like too humble. He's too softly spoken. He never wants to be the center of attention. And he purely makes things because it brings him joy to make things, not from like, sometimes I think we get caught up in like the making of something for the end result or for the joy of like to get the promotion or to get the job or to nail the brief or to get the financial benefits or to like impress your friends or to get more followers. Like there's always a bit of an end game, like an endless loop to what we do. Well, certainly is for me sometimes. Whereas my dad, it's like you make the thing, not to keep on rambling on about my dad, but like he makes the thing and then the thing is done. Dusts his hands off and goes on to the next thing. And there's something like fucking magical and untouchable about that. He can pick something up and put it down. And that's it. The finality of it, he's not at all wrapped up in what people think, because he doesn't believe what they think anyway.
Yeah.
Right? Because people say, oh, you're really good and really great. And he says, ho hum, I'm just here making this simple little thing. And that's his language to me quite a lot too. It's like, oh, it's just a bit of fun. That is the thesis of his creativity. Oh, it's just a bit of fun.
I love that.
I
fucking love that.
Positive and negative connotations come what may. Oh, it's just a bit of fun.
But I think that's what people like strive for when they talk about mindfulness and purpose. You know what I mean? Like that's such a beautiful example of it. And I'm just writing down some scrawlings as you talk, Mikey, and one of the words that I've written down is purpose, because I find it really interesting you talking about how your dad sort of found this purpose accidentally with the teaching that he does. But I wonder whether it's less that he accidentally found purpose and more that he finds purpose in whatever it is that he's doing. So, and I think potentially that act of making things and I touched the microphone, sorry, Dan. That act of making things and it being in the moment, like it is in itself the purpose.
Well, he's retired now, so this is a story that's being told right now.
Interesting.
We'll figure that out in the next bit.
Yeah.
If that was the thing that gave him that feeling, or if it's anything that gives him that feeling, because he's just that kind of person. And I think it's the latter. He's got people now coming up to him where because of his personality type and because he has a real love for teaching like naughty kids, like the kids that like don't get a lot of attention from other teachers in more traditional learning streams. And because my dad, leading up to his retirement, had gone back to relief teaching. So he was taking the subjects that he loved, like woodworking and electronics and home ec and music. My dad's also like plays guitar and is a musician and that sort of stuff. Typically where the naughty kids, quote unquote, end up going, right? To the manual oriented classes. And as a result now he's got parents who are coming to their house and saying, hey, David, like I know you're not at school anymore. My kid really misses your classes and is acting up at the moment. Is there some sort of like one-on-one pathway that we can have where he comes and hangs out with you at your house and like works with you or whatever, some like mentorship thing that I think people really see the value in, because my dad he's a very gentle person and I've seen it firsthand for decades now. Naughty kids aren't naughty around my dad. They're not. They have this he's got this aura where they're respectful and they're cheeky. They still have their cheekiness in their spirit. They're not subservient in any means. They're still naughty. Like they're still pushing the boundaries. But my dad is not at all upset about kids pushing the boundaries. He expects kids to push the boundaries. So when kids are being themselves, he sort of like in a way rewards them, but will reward them in a way where, and again, like I'm speaking at this at length because I've seen this with like people in my friendship group, because he's taught people in my friendship group. He's taught people my age, older than me, younger than me. Now he's taught kids who are 6, 7, right? And people who grow through their adolescence into adulthood. He can see the trajectory in front of people and he can say that kid, oh, that was like a naughty kid, but like that was a real kid. Like that was a kid that was like interested in these sorts of things. It didn't do that well at school, but just needed a bit of a prod in this direction. And I think now there'd be like a whole book of people who would say that, who would say thanks to my dad for like just helping them along the way, giving them a friendly nudge. Honestly, I can't speak up my dad enough.
I know. I'm like, oh, we're interviewing your dad for this podcast.
You should be interviewing my dad.
Is my first point, and then the second thing that I'm thinking of now is your phrase or your dad's phrase that it's just a bit of fun.
Just a bit of fun.
So obviously you come from this background, you're growing up around an influence like that. You've created a career around this idea of it's just a bit of fun. But it's also, there comes a point where it's not just a bit of fun, right? Like
Correct.
This is now your livelihood.
Correct.
There's this threshold where that fun is now monetized, and ideally it would be both. It doesn't have to be a binary. You don't have to, in theory, you don't have to choose between a bit of fun and a bit of money, but sometimes you do. So how do you think about managing financial obligations and the kind of real life admin and creating a sustainable creative practice that remains a bit of fun?
I feel very passionately about, and it's a privileged position to be in, obviously, I'll acknowledge that if you are making work that is led from your creative, like from your heart, and you're putting your everything behind it and you're elevating it to where you think it should be and you're not settling, right? Because as a creative, it's quite easy to settle. You know, I won't touch this or I won't touch that or that's good enough and I'll move on to this bit. I really find like if you're doing your best to look at your creative process and your output and be critical about it and say, is that as good as I could have done? Is that as far as I could have pushed that envelope? I think if you're doing that, I think that the work is always going to be better. And then if you're worried about, I mean, they're just such big conversations, isn't it? Like money versus creativity versus like living
Even
your
as
life.
I asked you, I was like, will you just solve the creative dilemma? Thanks.
I think if you make, it's tough because the nuances of like the nuances of trends and like, let's take like crocheting as an example. Ceramics, beautiful example. Ceramics. If you did ceramics in the 90s and the 2000s, we would have been having a very different conversation about making a living, making something that is very utilitarian. Maybe not, actually. I'll take that back. A mix of utilitarian and aesthetic beauty. But ceramics not being on vogue through those decades is a very different conversation about now, where it's like every second person is a ceramicist, which is not a dig at ceramicists, but I mean like the talent pool is now so big that really if you're exceptional, there's more than enough for you. And that ebbs and flows, right? But I think that, and it's the same with great musicians. If you're a great jazz musician now, for instance, if you're a jazz prodigy, you're not going to get the same coverage as you would have in the 60s, 50s and 60s. Mm. If you're in a awesome rock and roll band, it's just not going to work the way it would have worked if it was the 70s. Or if you're in a progressive punk band that has something to say and is like making earth-shatteringly good music.
Do you think though, Mikey, is that just because the world in general is more diluted in the sense that like there'll never be another Beatles because we've got Netflix, you know what I mean? Because there's no like no one's ever going to watch Friends at the same time every day of the week again. Like there's not going to be these like big movements in the same way there once was because it's sort of become more diluted, which is also wonderful because people who similar interests and like-minded things can find their communities anywhere in the world from the phone in their hand. But there won't be, those like big blow-up music stars or pop stars or even movie stars in the way that there was.
I think there
20
will.
years ago.
I think if you look at more like of a macro picture, like I'm talking about genres based on popular music of the last 100 years. Popular music hasn't really changed in 100 years. Not really. Popular music is still popular music. I mean, like from the classical, Renaissance, Romantic, Baroque period of music, those totally different like time periods, right? I can't remember the exact time periods, but like the 1850s when Baroque music was like the most popular form of music, and it's never going to get better than this, people. Baroque chamber music is where it's at. Contrapuntal music played on a harpsichord. Fuck yeah. Bach has nailed it. There's never going to be anyone bigger than Bach.
If it's not Baroque, don't fix it.
Ooh, lady. Zing.
I apologize.
Incredible.
But yeah.
I can't even remember where I was going with that.
Can I ask, or can I mean, it was
what we're talking about is
terrible.
like, is there going to be like we're talking about things from like a more micro perspective. So it's like, the biggest person of the last 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Mm-hmm. What about the next major change in the way that people experience? This is a big conversation. I'm just prefacing this. We're talking about music. Music has changed dramatically in the way we experience it from the times I was just talking about. From like classical era music, where you would go to a place to hear a performance, right? Or you'd be sitting in a chamber listening to a performance, to now we have like recorded music and live music as being very separate things. And then looking into the future, how is music going to be experienced by human beings personally and as a group?
I see.
So it's like, I mean, just throwing things at the wall because you don't know, but it's like there's this real big rise of like ASMR right now. What if music becomes something more textural that you can feel? What if there's headphones you can put on your skull that actually make you feel music in a way that people with synesthesia experience music as light, shapes, colors, feelings, emotions, right? We're so in tune right now that you just finished my sentence with something so out there. So what if music is something that transcends how we experience it now? And then you start to ask yourself, well, of course there's going to be new artists, there's going to be new people. Because what I find hilarious about this is when Skrillex came on. No, because it's funny because it was just like,
ladies and gentlemen.
It's because Rolling Stone or whoever, everyone at the time was like, this is the future of music. And it's like, Linkin Park was the future of music in the 2000s. Rap rock was the future of music, nu metal. So let's all just pump our brakes a bit and just acknowledge that popular music is popular music as it exists now. We listen to it through headphones. The future of music for each strand of your hair. So we listen to it. We listen to it as audio waves coming at us, and our eardrums perceive it as sound. Right? That might change. That will change. I've 100% that'll change. Just like the way we experience movies will change. The way we experience movies might change to a way we experience memories. Again, I'm just throwing things at the wall. What if things are interconnected in a way that we have access to references and things and an internet of things at any given time? How does that change our way we take in music? Or is that even a thing we do anymore? Is music something that people look back and go, oh yeah, my granddad used to put on like whatever, like his computer or his iPod or however, or a record or a tape or whatever, or they just listen to it digitally? And they used to put on headphones and listen to music. How fucked up is that? That's all they did. And they would just sit there like fucking idiots.
People used to listen to music with their ears.
So one-dimensional, right? You couldn't even feel anything.
Can I just say we absolutely should have taken shrooms before this interview?
This is the kind of stuff that...
Maybe Mikey has.
Carissa and I go, we don't fly to Sydney. We drive every time. Because these are the conversations that we have. And these are the conversations that are really pivotal to our creative process, where it's like, yeah, they're hilarious. And to think about what the future might yield is like reading a Discworld novel. Like some of it will land and some of it won't, right? And in the annals of history, you look back and you think like, oh yeah, that one novel this time mentioned this type of orb of information, and that represents the internet in a way that like, how did they even do that 30 years in advance? None of this is going to stick probably.
It's speculative.
But it's speculative and it's really fun to talk about. And I think like what's really interesting about it is there are people who are really like, that will want to talk about this stuff and get passionate about it. And there are people who are really reticent to talk about it. And we've had these moments where it's like, you'll bring it up with someone and they're like, fuck no, I'm not going there. I'm scared. I don't, it's like, I don't want to watch Black Mirror because it's too close to to reality. There are those types of people too. And that's fine. I find that having these conversations is just a bit of fun, right? Like you're just...
Well, it's exercise. It's taking your creative brain to gym.
Correct.
And just fucking around. Have you heard of, they do that exercise with I think it's like a paper clip with kids, and it's supposed to be a creativity exercise. So they'll sit with a bunch of kids and be like, here's a paper clip, list out all the possible uses you could have for this paper clip.
Oh,
and they
sick. I've never heard of that.
They go wild and they'll come up with hundreds, and it'll be like, you can unwind it and reshape it and use it for the key to your spaceship. I mean, like, who the fuck knows? They say whatever they want.
Yeah.
And then they do that same exercise with adults.
Yeah.
And adults have like three.
Because they're boring as fuck.
Yeah. And it's fitness. It's mental flexibility and fitness.
We talk about this all the time, and we talked about it when we did the presentation for Creative Mornings last year now.
Yeah. It was when we were still locked down.
We talk about this idea of like, Chris has got nieces and nephews who are kids, and we get to hang out with kids a bit. And it's just like, it's so refreshing to hang out with kids because they think like that. Because there's no boundaries. There's no boring ass boundaries on what things can or cannot be. So I think we're at our best when we think we try and embrace our creativity as like we're trying to make things that are like, for those who don't know, Studio Ting makes like homewares and furniture, but we're in like a high-end sort of luxury demographic. Like we're making things for, considered chic spaces.
Collectors, not consumers.
Yeah, we're definitely more on the art sculptural side of the spectrum than the utilitarian furniture side of the spectrum, although we like to satisfy both. There is functionality in the things we make, but we are over-engineering these things to be functional art pieces, essentially. We're at our best when we can think, would a kid really love this? It's a fucking object tray. And like, kids don't like object trays. Who gives a shit what it is? It doesn't matter. It's a hand mirror. It's a vanity mirror. It's an object tray. It's a coffee table, whatever. Would a kid love to look at it? Would they love to just like stop and touch it? You know, when a kid sees something and they must stop everything they're doing and run their hand along it, or like look at it and look underneath and like pick it up a little bit, and would it satisfy younger brains? Because I think if you can tick that box, then I think everyone's creativity is different, and I get that everyone's products are different. Carissa and I's products are extremely fun, right? They're colorful and they're vibrant. We're trying to tick two very disparate boxes in furniture where it's like fun, exciting, textural, feely, satisfying many of your senses, but then also we're trying to make something that's elevated and chic, right? And not trend-based for the home, of an adult.
Yeah.
So
For the home of an adult.
for the home of an adult.
Is that the subtitle on your
Kids
website?
kids have
For
no
the
money.
home of
They won't-
adult.
kids won't buy anything. They have no money.
God, get a
Idiots.
They're
job,
idiots.
kids.
Get a job, kids. Get a job and buy my stuff.
You know what I always think of, thinking that's like those things that are just beautiful and you want to touch them
Delightful.
and hold them. Yes. So my mum had this potato peeler. It was not particularly expensive, but it was beautiful. Just the shape of it, the weight of it. She loved it. And every time she picked it up to use it, she would comment on how much she loved the feel of it in her hand and how much joy she got from peeling potatoes, which is not a fun job. I don't like peeling anything, really. And just because that thing was so beautiful, it brought this like very mundane task into being one of the highlights of her day just through the beauty and brightness of this object. So I think those things are actually, you know, they can be seen as frivolous when you're trying to, you know, find that balance of beauty and utility, that people maybe lean towards the utility side sometimes for things like, yeah, potato peelers or even hand mirrors or like you guys may. But that the beauty side of it is going to make you probably want to actually use it more and bring you those small moments of joy in your day, which is what like the whole of life is, right? Like it's a series of small moments of joy.
It's the peeling the potatoes in the evening to feed your family. Like there's a lot more of that than the huge moments, right? There are a lot more of those moments than the graduations and the firstborn babies and the big stuff.
Yeah.
That says a lot about that kind of person though as well, that can take a step back and appreciate that object changes the way that they're doing a mundane task, right? Like
That's true.
that says a lot about the kind of person that your mother is, or it speaks to, I don't know your mum, but it speaks to a sort of like energy that is like appreciative and I guess understands that someone put a lot of time and effort into making that thing feel just right. And what that is a perfect analogy, not even an analogy, it's a direct reflection of when I make a hand mirror, for example. It's like, what are we going to make it out of? We want to choose like a ferrous or a non-ferrous metal or timber or stone or whatever. And we landed on steel because steel has a real heft to it. So when you pick it up, if it's made of aluminium, it weighs probably 300 grams and it doesn't feel the same, right? Whereas if it's made of steel, it's a bit more labor intensive. It's definitely a harder material to manipulate and fabricate and put in our gorgeous curves that we put into the handle and stuff. There are certainly easier ways to make it, but it's undeniable when you pick it up that it's like, if you're in the know, then you know it's made of steel and it's been made a certain way and there's an appreciation there. But if you're not in the know, you also feel like we've had people pick it up and go, oh, you know, audibly, oh, because it's got a gravity to it that doesn't necessarily just have a physical gravity. And I think that you don't need an understanding of furniture manufacturing or engineering to just like to feel that thing, whether that's like a type of fabric for an upholstery or like the squishiness of a cushion or how oil paint dries on a canvas in layers. Like you can pick the real McCoy from the not, even if you don't know what you're looking for. That's why people go to the NGV and stare for hours, because they think that they're supposed to stare, right? Because they're looking for the things that like, I think they're trying to like wrestle with that idea of like, what brings me joy? And it doesn't matter what other people think, versus like, I'm supposed to look at this painting and like understand what the artist was getting at.
I'm so interested in this, right? How do you move through a gallery or through a museum space?
Is that the end of your question?
That's the end of my
Such a
question.
great question.
I have a real glowing regard for the NGV. I think the NGV is like, you know, we've all been to like a lot of museums around the world and a lot of like places like that. I think the NGV's got this real aura about it, not just because of the architecture, which is amazing. But what I really love about the NGV, and I've spoken at length about this to friends and family and whoever else goes to the NGV, they have a very specific temperament to the way they present ideas, in that they include everyone. Like when you read a description of a thing, it's got like, it'll have like the for kids section, right? And it will be asking like more pragmatic questions about like, what do you think the ocean represents in this painting or whatever. But the way they present information and the way they direct you around an installation and a series of rooms, I think it's untouchable. It's so good. And it presents it in a way that is like, it's for everyone. For the people who have a lot of experience in that particular field of art making, or like that's their passion, like that specific thing, like you go to a Dali exhibition, it's like, oh, surrealist painting is my thing. Like that's my jam. You will get just as much out of that presentation because it's not remedial as the person who has no experience going into it, because it's got just the right amount of information that prepares you to ask your own questions. Again, like I'll speak about this at length because I think I've noticed it on subsequent trips to the NGV. Like my advice for people is always get the audio tour, because they do a fabulous job of putting together an audio tour. And if you don't want to like look or speak to humans, fantastic, because they give you noise cancelling headphones as well, so you can just put them on and not listen to the audio. But you have the lanyard, so it's like don't
signal.
Yeah. I'm listening. But no, the audio tours are always presented in a way that's just like, I don't know. They put a lot of again. It comes back to that idea of like thought and care. How can we elevate this idea, which is a small part of the exhibition overall. The audio tour complementing the actual work, right? But it's people's only gateway into that information sometimes. So if you can present it in a way and elevate it in a way that's inclusive, it's informational, it's fun, and it's gestural in terms of prompting you to ask the questions that you don't feel like you have to ask. It's the ones that naturally you want to ask, because I do that all the time. Like I'm an imposter when I go to an art gallery that has no direction. It's like, what the fuck am I looking at? We talk about it all the time, Carissa and I, when you go to an installation and there's no supplemental information. What the fuck are you looking at? You're looking at something, because I don't know the artist personally. I don't know. There's no bio. There's no what the work represents. It's just, it could be like a collection of sculptures around a room. Take what you want. Like, I don't know what I'm looking at. And I can see that it takes time and energy to do a sculpture. I also see sometimes that it doesn't take time and energy to do a sculpture or a piece of art or listening to music. Like if you don't have the supplemental information, a lot of the times you're just going on aesthetics alone. And that's not good enough sometimes, because everyone's different. I like things that are different to you, to Carissa, to Alice. So it either hits or it doesn't hit. And so we do this, like we'll go around an exhibition that's got no information and we'll be looking at something and Chris will go, I like that. And for no other reasons other than it just doesn't tickle me, I'll say, I don't like that at all. But if we had some direction from the artist, and I guess like people would probably feel as passionately on the other side of this as I would, oh, you shouldn't need the information or whatever, the artist, you take, it's all individual. You take what you want from it. But I think I always love a little bit of insight from the person who made it. Not necessarily about the work itself, even about their personality or like their journey.
Some context.
Just some context for the piece. And
I'm
I think
a big believer in story like that. Same as wine as well, you know, like I think anyone who's been to a fancy restaurant and you've had someone tell you the story of that wine, it tastes objectively better. And I don't mean that in a disparaging, minimizing way. Like it's not a trick. It's just the power of story, and it's a gift. It's like we love as humans just someone telling us why something matters and where it came from and the feelings involved in producing it. And
I got told long ago from a business mentor that like, I'm not selling furniture. I'm selling my story.
Yeah.
And it's so true. Like if you can imbue the thing that you're making, and again, this comes back to like, we're working in an environment where we're selling work. Not everyone is selling work. And that's cool. But if you are, then it behooves you to think about how you can make the audience connect with your story. And if you can, and you can make a lot of different people connect to it, I think you have a really great maybe you don't necessarily have a great product, but you have a great understanding of how business works, or at least like, I don't really know where I was going with that.
Mikey, one of the first things you spoke about when you were talking about the start of your journey, you moved to Melbourne as a musician, was around identity and how being a musician is still a really big part of your identity. And I feel like maybe part of what you're saying comes back to identity. Like if you're really sure of who you are, it comes through in your work. And that's almost like an antithesis to imposter syndrome. You know what I mean? Like if you're really sort of confident and sure of your identity, and that can shine through whether you're playing golf, making mirrors, playing music, weightlifting. These are all things that Mikey is excellent at, by the way. And there's more. I don't know. Do you think maybe, and we haven't actually asked you, Mikey, how imposter syndrome has or hasn't shown up in your creative and professional life, but you are someone who strives for excellence and is excellent at a lot of things. I'm not saying that to blow smoke up your ass. It's a truth. And you also come across as very, very confident and comfortable in your identity and very aware of that story that we're talking about. You're aware of your own story and seem to be able to deliver it very confidently. So I'm interested, I guess, in how identity shows up and whether or not that sort of having that strong identity has helped you navigate or avoid imposter syndrome in your life and work.
I think it's quite fitting that it hasn't been brought up yet, like the thesis of the podcast, is that it is like it permeates everything we do. We don't need to constantly talk about it. Not to like say you don't need to do the podcast, like constantly talk about it.
Every week.
But I mean, as artists, like it's so built into, especially in our age demographic, it's built into how we navigate the world. Even not as artists, just as human beings. Like it's not something that we can always put our finger on or have a discussion about, but it's always there. I think that going back to what Alice was talking about earlier too, just to like join the arc together, Alice mentioned something about being like when you start something new and you're terrible at it, right? That's everyone. There's very few things that are challenging. I would say like challenging, like have a really steep learning curve. There are very few times where you pick up something and you do it and you're above average at it straight away. And I think I have a strength in being able to be like a natural aptitude to do something. I think that comes down to like I have good motor skills. I have good awareness of my own body and kinesthetic movement. I understand how my brain works, but I think the biggest thing that allows me to excel at a lot of things is I'm not afraid to be bad at something, right? And I have been struggling with that since I was a kid, but now as an adult, I understand that, you know, as you become an adult, you have less time to do stuff. You have to compartmentalize. You're going to be bad at something when you start. If you don't find the enjoyment in the practice or the execution of the thing, then like, what are you going after? If you're going after just to be good at something, you'll hate the journey and you'll hate being good at it. And you probably won't get there anyway. There's very few people, like using golf as an example, like to become a scratch golfer, right? Which I'm trying my best to do now. I'm a little bit away, but I'm getting there.
Sorry, Mikey, what does that mean? Scratch golfer?
It means that if it takes, so there's an idea of in golf you're playing against par, right? Like so every hole is worth 4 strokes or 3 strokes or 5 strokes. To hit par or better means that you're exceptional at golf because the par is measured against essentially a professional golfer. A professional golfer is expected to shoot par on any given course. So for most courses that means 72 over 18 holes. So if someone says, oh yeah, I shot 72, that means they shot even. They didn't shoot any strokes over the recommended stroke limit. So an average golfer shoots, I would say, at least 18 strokes over par. Will shoot 90. To get anywhere from 90 down to 72, like anywhere in that bracket, you're better than average at golf, basically.
Okay.
If you pick up a golf club and go play right now, you two, having like little experience, you'll shoot 120.
Oh,
Easy.
I'll be amazing.
But even like amazing, like natural aptitude. It's like with weightlifting, similar with weightlifting too, or ice hockey. Anything that involves like multiple, like dynamic movements and different disciplines all wrapped up into one very quick movement. You can't just pick up weights and be good at weightlifting. You can be strong, naturally strong, but your natural strengths have a limit where technical prowess always transcends. So the people who are exceptionally good at weightlifting are the people that have been lifting long enough to realize that their technique is impeccable, but also have been training long enough, their muscles are primed and ready for explosive dynamic movement, and couple those two together and you have something special, right? So a lot of people go into weightlifting because it is a very challenging sport, or like golf or like hockey, like you don't know the movement, you're not comfortable doing it. So you can't you can't recruit all your muscles and have the right chain of movement to do it properly or effectively, to do it at a high enough level, right? Some people are really gifted and can. Those are the few, the very, very few and far betweens. What I'm getting at is with learning, my strength is not because I pick something up and I'm naturally good at it. I think I pick something up quickly, but I love to practice. I love to practice in anything. If I see an enjoyment in practice, I'll find the time to do it. And the next time you see me, which if it's a week, you'll see me in a week and you'll say, wow, you're naturally very good at this thing, but I've been working my ass off for a week to get to where I want to be, because that's how my brain works. And I get that like a week in the grand scheme of things, like with drawing or making music, like a week it's chump change. You can get a lot done in a week if you know how your brain works. And I think that's one of my superhuman strengths, is my understanding of my own brain. I can streamline the learning process in a way that my music teacher programmed it into me when I was a kid.
Tell me more.
Her name is Margaret Ransley, and I affectionately call her Gran. She's my surrogate grandmother, and I lucked into her when I was about 10, I think. I'd been taking group keyboard classes because I was playing the keyboard. Cool kids play the keyboard. And I graduated from, as you do at that age, from like private lessons in a group to like one-on-one lessons. It's basically like the next step when you're a kid. Basically, like you figure out if you like doing it as a kid, and if you like doing it, then mum and dad make the decision that it's like, okay, we're going to spend an exorbitant amount of money we don't have on this thing, so you better practice. But I got really lucky. I had Gran, who is still around. Still speak to her. Still message her. She's got Facebook Messenger. She knows what's up.
That's so cool.
And she was just like this. She was a very like defining person in my life, like my father is creatively. And she instilled in me this understanding that slow, repetitive practice was the be-all and end-all to be a virtuoso piano player or to become a performance pianist, which I was really gunning for in my teens. I really wanted to be a really young concert pianist. So I take those lessons that Gran taught me and still teaches me and apply those to any dynamic movement or any artistic skill set. And bear in mind, I'm only talking about the physical nature of something, right? The artistry involved comes with time as well. Or everyone has a different element to that. Like people who pick up something for the first time, like if you've never picked up a guitar before and you use that to write a song, if you're an exceptional songwriter, you will make a song with a guitar that is probably going to be quite unique and probably quite exciting. Whereas like the parameters of, if you're very good at something, like a guitar, for instance, your hands go to the places that they've been before. Tom Waits said that. He said your hands are like old dogs and they'll rest in the places that they are familiar. That's why every Tom Waits record is... He makes it with a primarily different instrument. So he's got like great records that are made with like saxophone and then the percussion records. And the piano ones, obviously like the more ballady records that he's quite famous for. So it must be challenging when you think about something like Bob Dylan, who's been making guitar-based songs and piano-based songs for the better part of 60 years now, and he's still making great songs. And great, like, I'd urge everyone to go listen to a more recent Dylan record. They're excellent. They're really, really good. Yeah, it must be so challenging to be able to just keep on making songs in the same format.
I guess everything costs something, right? And it's like, that's the thing, is with any endeavor, you develop an eye over time, or you develop an ear over time, but that costs you. You pay for it with that beautiful, chaotic, unpredictable, new energy, the energy of the beginner. But likewise, yeah, I mean, you can't stay a beginner forever at something, because that would cost you the potential really different, amazing work that you could make that comes with depth. But you kind of, I
love that
feel
idea
like
of there being
everything
an
costs
exchange.
something. Yeah.
Yeah. I think in my haste to move through the learning curve as quickly as possible, if I really like something, sometimes I'm guilty of actually like not getting all the enjoyment that I should be getting out of something. So if it's like, whatever, if I go and learn a new skill tomorrow, if I learn hip-hop dancing or whatever, and I become enamored with it, sometimes I'm a bit guilty of like getting too hardcore into it and then practicing too religiously. And then you kind of forget sometimes. It's like, oh yeah, this is like a fun thing to do. Because that's the way that I was brought up or wired. And I'm sure everyone's a bit similar, where it's like, is there, at the back of your mind, it's like, oh, is there like financial gratification for the thing you're doing? No. Then should you be doing it? Like, can you turn that into a job? Are you safe? Right? Like, that's just the voice of your parents and their parents.
Get to good as soon as you possibly can.
And then make a job out of it. Because if not, it's worthless. Don't do it. And it's just, life is just so not like that. Again, an extremely privileged position to be in.
What are you most excited, speaking of work stuff, what are you most excited about at the moment?
I'm excited about our newest collection as a studio. We have a retailer in Sydney who is bringing out our first exclusive with their brand, and I'm excited about finally having a product as a studio that we can stand behind and believe in, and it's been years in the making.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But it also feels, like we just talked about, it feels like we're on the slope of the learning curve. We haven't hit the exponential increase yet. We're on the shallow side of the learning curve, which is the fun side, because that's where all the growth happens. So I'm most excited about showing the world that we exist in making things, but I'm also got my eye on the future, because I'm hoping that this unlocks the next level of creativity for Carissa and I, and also the next like monetary barrier, because we have things we want to do that just cost a fucking fortune.
Yeah.
Right? Like, not just because we are in a luxury space, but just because the amount of prototyping and man hours to get like, you know, like a chain stitched embroidered sequin bathrobe off the ground is outrageous. Or
one, please.
Correct. Yeah, correct. Or like, I mean, we have, the idea for Carissa and I is to turn the studio offering, which right now is homewares and furniture, into something a bit more playful and fun and bigger. Like, I'd love to have our own atelier. I'd love to have a fashion house. I'd love to do a runway show. I'd love to have sneakers and a sneaker collab with someone. I'd love to make like leather handbags. But like, that's the more traditional stuff. But like, the bigger things that I think fashion houses are really like amazing and awe-inspiring is the ability to actually shape how people think and feel about things, like primitive things like color and texture, materials. I would love to be on the forefront of that and have a studio which is synonymous with pushing boundaries of what people do with the things that they own. Right? Or how that transcends. Like, is it more than just things that you own? Again, going back to this conversation about like how we experience music, or how we might ingest media in a different way in the future. Like, how does that affect the studio? Because it will. 100% it will. And if you run away from questions like that, then I think you're doing yourself a huge disservice, because we have the brain power to at least like think about it and talk about it and get excited about it. And we don't really know what it is yet. But again, it's those creative conversations that lead to like the next idea. And the next idea might just be a more remedial idea of like, oh, it's a vanity mirror. But it took like a huge 8-hour discussion about like the future and mankind and technology and a battery arms race to get there, right? Like it's, I think these are the things that I'm most excited about. I guess to answer your question, I'm most excited about finally putting our foot out there as a studio in a meaningful way where it's like, here's something we make that we stand behind, that, to go back to the conversations we had before, every element of it is touched on and elevated and thoughtful. And I think that we have, while we only have a small collection of products, we have a hand mirror, we have an object tray, and we have a vanity mirror for a bathroom. We only have a small amount because they take a fucking long time when you have to elevate every part of it. Not have to, we want to. So we've got things like, you know, when you buy a luxury bag, you get a dust bag with it as well, which is ridiculous. You keep your bag in a bag. But that's what you have to do to prevent it from like getting UV damage or getting marks on it or having color transfer, things like that you don't think about when you buy a luxury pair of like of beautiful shoes or whatever. So we're thinking about, we should put dust bags for our products. Why wouldn't we? They're like ornate and decorative and extremely delicate. Why wouldn't we make a dust bag? But then I don't want to get just like an off-the-shelf dust bag. I don't want to import it from another place. Like everything we do is done locally. Typically it starts being done by us and then we try and find people to help us with the workload because we have so many things in the air. But it's like, for these ones, yeah, we'll just make our own dust bags. So I was literally at Spotlight an hour ago trying to find the right cotton flannelette, the right color, the right feel, and then the right drawstring, which is a fucking nightmare, by the way. They only have like 10 different drawstrings.
Only 10 different drawstrings.
Spotlight, for God's
That's not
sakes.
enough
Guys, sort it out.
drawstrings.
Anyway, so we got the color combo and we've got the material and I've got, you know, sewing machine in the overlocker. I can make them. That's no sweat. But like something as simple as like when the person gets that product home, that's the first port of call for them. They're going to unravel. They're going to open a box because it's in a box, right? They're going to open a nice decorative box and inside is going to be a beautiful rose-colored dust bag. And it's going to have a nice drawstring because we chose the right one. But that's just, I think it sounds so trivial, but whether or not they keep that bag or not, different people will and different people won't. They might not keep it in there. They might just like it for the photo shoot. I think it's important that everything you do is at least got some like heart behind it and some thoughtfulness behind it. Yeah. And that's just one example, and it is like a bit more of a trivial example. It's a dust bag. But it's like getting the right shade of powder coat, getting the right textural overlay of that powder coat. Like these are things that take so much time and effort and money at the end of the day to get right, but they are worth getting right because we are just surrounded by things now. We're in the business of things, right? Let's not shy away from that. We're making things, but we are now surrounded by things in our lives that hold such little significance because the exchange in our brain is so minimal. It's like, and I'm not slagging off like going to Kmart because I go to Kmart and I go to IKEA. One of the funnest things Krista and I do is go to IKEA and we like go on a field trip and we write down things that we fucking love because there's so much to love at IKEA. But it's like, how can we like make that ours and how can we change it? Anyway, I digress. But we're surrounded by things now which have such little relevance and meaning that it's hard sometimes to find meaning unless it's like smacks you in the face. Mm-hmm. And you do see that when you go to like, I don't know, like if you go to like the NGV again, if you go like see something that totally moves you and you're like, oh yeah, things, man, things can be fucking outrageous.
Things can be great. And
things
I actually
can be really great.
You mentioned that you thought that it was like the dust bag or whatever could be trivial. And I actually don't think it is at all because we all know that feeling. You're creating an experience. Right?
I said trivial, but I don't mean trivial. I mean like, it's my dad. It's just a bit of fun again. I'm just trying to like speak. Yeah, I'm trying to avoid being an imposter.
Those little things, and we've all had that moment where you open something like Apple products are great at it, you know, whatever, where it's just everything has its place and it looks beautiful And I've thought a lot about what is it that makes you feel so good when you open something like that. And I think, it's just my theory, that it makes you feel cared for. It makes you feel like someone has put in the effort to pick the right fucking drawstring from Spotlight, choose the right colour powder coating, choose exactly the right shade of bag. And you're not going to be aware of all of those details, but you're going to be aware of the overwhelming sense when you open it that someone cares about this and they care about you and how you feel about it.
I love that. I love that.
It's the potato peeler effect. It's like
the
thinking
potato
about
peeler.
the hand of the person who will be peeling those potatoes
Yep.
and that matters to you and it'll affect the design choices that you make because you love the person who's going to use it. And you're like, I haven't met you yet, but I love you.
Well, they've made a very expensive choice to support you.
Yeah.
In our case, it's like you've laid down a lot of money for this product, and what I would love is for you to get that feeling that you just described, and for it to elevate the more utilitarian aspect of it, because it's a hand mirror. Like you're looking at yourself while you pluck your eyebrows or like whatever, trim your nose hairs. You guys probably don't have to do that, but like
Not yet.
just ears
It's
right
like
now.
Rapunzel up in here.
I can see it. Yeah, I would love for that if every person who made that decision and then upon opening the product felt that, oh, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Maybe it is a care for other people. I don't know.
It is. Yeah. Well, we should probably wrap things up.
I feel
think.
like we didn't even
We got like 18 months into your story, but you know what? This is all about tangents. That's what the whole thing is. It's just
I feel like we didn't
a
even
series
talk
of
about the
tangents.
things that we were meant to talk about.
there's nothing that we're meant to talk about.
But you know what I
It's
mean?
all that
Like
stuff.
I feel like we had a set, like this is what we should touch on, and we went woo and didn't even get near it.
There are no
And
rules.
Basically,
baby.
what I'm saying is I want to talk more.
I
wanna
think-
hang out more and
I
talk
think
more.
this is going to be the first of many conversations. And yeah, I think part of it is, I mean, there's the plan for what we're going to chat about, but there's also the conversation that actually happens. And a big part of this is us giving each other permission to go to that place. And it's literally, it's the conversation for anyone who's listened this far into this podcast to know that the second we stop the recording, our immediate question is, we're like, oh my God, was that the thing? Was that good or was that fucking shit? And then we have to kind of pause and look into each other's eyes and be like, it's actually not our job to know that. It's just our job. Make the thing. Some parts of it'll be cool. Some parts didn't work. You talked about some of what you wanted to talk about. Other parts you like.
And you're on the learning curve.
Oh man, we are we're riding that learning curve
Yeah.
into the ground.
There's a quote, and I'm going to butcher this, but it's something along the lines of an artist is not entitled to the fruits of their labour, only to their labour. Which I think is very relevant to most of the discussion you've been having today, Mikey, but also to us. We're doing the thing. The fruits of it is your problem.
Make the thing. Make the thing. And yeah, I loved what you said. I think there are a few things I'm going to take away, but just that idea of when you just said, I love to practice, it's such a simple sentence, but I felt like I'd never just heard someone own that and mean it. Like you meant that. And I'm like, God, for the rest, I feel like that's the montage usually. That's the part that's like chopped up.
Oh, that's such
Right? Like
yeah,
we're
such
taught
a
like you're
revelation.
supposed to skip the practice is seen as like
It's
the
so
worst
yeah,
bit and the
boring
boring
part.
bit. And
It's
like
the bit you have to dress up
yeah,
for it to be like a montage format with sexy music, for it to be palatable,
right?
to at least like show the
because
journey.
it's not fun for anyone else, right? You get no audience while you're practicing, but just I love the way you said that. It just like it hit my skin and bones in this deep way of like, yeah, I think anyone who works creatively, you better fucking love the practice or you're doing the wrong thing. And it's fine if you don't, but
also the notion
then
of like
don't do that.
the practice is the output as well.
Yeah.
So it's like as graphic recorders, you guys, when you do a job, you're practicing. That's why when you go to yoga, they call it your practice. You are practicing.
Yeah.
Not like you're going to do a big yoga presentation one day or a big yoga show. But it's
Yoga
the same,
show.
But it's the same with going to a golf course for
nightmare.
me. The practice isn't the lead up to the big dance,
Yeah.
right? Like I'm not a professional athlete playing in like something that has gravitas to it. Like I'm not playing in a like a conference final in the NBA where everything is on the line and my performance is paramount. This is me going to play golf and is like a direct reflection of all the practice I've been putting in. But the game itself is the practice. Same with the art making. Every time you make something, you're practicing for the next thing, I think. If you don't love the practice, then, I don't know, I guess I can't really speak for everyone else, but if I don't love the practice, I'm probably not going to do the thing. But I haven't come across something that I don't like to do yet. Not really. But I guess that's just more about my, like, insecurities as a human being than it does about my strengths of character to be like, yes, the practice.
Or your curiosity as well.
Yeah.
Just the world is an inherently interesting place if you show up
with
that
true.
with that mindset.
Yeah. We've come back to that a couple of times. Everything is good and people are good, and
We
want to reward those people.
To maybe end on that note, because that feels like a good place to put a full stop at the end of this first of many conversations. Mikey, thank you so much for your time and deep thought and attention that you give to conversation. It really is. Obviously, there's no visuals to go with this, but at every question, you clearly show such deep reflection when you're going to answer, and it's such a privilege to kind of hold that space with someone. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and attention and ideas with us. And thank you, as always, Jessamy. I fucking love you and love this excuse to hang out always.
And Mr. Mikey Ting, love you dearly. Thank you so much for joining us, and proud to know you.
Proud to be known. You guys are great friends of mine.
Yeah. Also, thanks anyone who's been listening, coming along for the journey with us. We've loved it. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Imposter Syndrome Club. You can follow us on Instagram at ImposterPod or visit us online at impostersyndromeclub.com. Rate and review. That's what podcasters say.
Like and subscribe.
Are we real podcasters now?
I think we've got this.
Great.